The widow by the dying river. The village of Aboko used to breathe with the rhythm of the river. Its waters flowed clear and deep, carrying fish, laughter, and life to the people who lived along its banks. It was said the river was a blessing from the spirits, a sacred gift passed down through generations. But now, it was a ghost. What once flowed had become a cracked scar through the land, winding past the village like a forgotten promise. The riverbed was dry and splintered, the mud hardened like bone. Fish no longer swam, crops no longer grew, and the people of Aboko whispered of curses and broken paths. At the edge of this dying world lived Nia, a young widow in her early 30s. Her skin was the color of river clay, warm and rich, though it had grown pale from solitude. She had once been known for her laughter, a quiet, melodic thing that could calm crying children and stubborn goats alike. Now, she spoke only when necessary, and laughed, well, no one remembered the last time. She lived alone in a crumbling mud brick hut, nestled among twisted fig trees and wild weeds near the river's dead calf. Her only companion was the wind that whistled through the broken windows. Nia's husband, Jabari, had been Aboko's healer. A kind man with clever hands and a spine like iron. He believed the land near the river was sacred, not just spiritually, but biologically. He argued with the village elders, claiming they were digging too deep, disturbing something ancient beneath the earth. Then, one moonless night, Jabari went to gather herbs along the river and never returned. They found his body days later, eyes open, face calm, hands resting on his chest like he had fallen asleep standing. No wounds. No signs of struggle. Just gone. They buried him near the river he loved. Nia had cried until the tears stopped coming. Then she stayed. She refused to leave the land, despite whispered warnings and veiled threats. And so, Aboko turned its back on her. They blamed her. They said she had angered the river, that Jabari's death was punishment for her pride. That her presence was poisoning the crops and summoning disease. Children were told not to speak her name. Women walked past her in silence at the market. Even the dogs barked differently when she passed. But Nia remained. She survived off wild herbs, stale bread, and the occasional fish from the shrinking tributaries. She spoke to no one but the wind, and sometimes to Jabari's old robe, which she still wore on cold nights. His scent had long faded, but the weight of it wrapped around her like a shield. It was on one of these cold nights, when even the frogs had stopped singing, that the river whispered back. Nia had wandered down to the riverbed just after dusk. She wasn't sure why, perhaps out of habit, perhaps because something had stirred in her chest like a memory trying to wake up. The riverbed was dry and cracked, but something strange shimmered beneath the surface, or rather, where the surface should have been. A soft, pulsing glow. She knelt, brushing dust aside with her fingers. The glow didn't disappear. It danced like light beneath water. Then, a sharp pain. "Oh," she gasped, jerking her hand back. Something had slithered across her ankle. She didn't see it clearly, only a glimpse, scales, a shimmer of gold and green, a flicker of movement. Then heat surged up her leg like fire running backward through her veins. She staggered, fell to her knees, and collapsed. The world twisted. Her eyes fluttered as the stars above began to spin. Then, she was no longer on the riverbed. She was falling through a sky made of water, the stars flickering like fish in the deep. And then, voices. Soft. Echoing. Familiar and not. The vessel has accepted the seed. She was chosen long ago. The river remembers. She floated in the dark, the voices calling around her like smoke. They did not speak with mouths, but with meaning, straight into her soul. Some were gentle. Others stern. All of them ancient. Then a final voice spoke, clear and deep, not male, not female, but something older. The serpent stares. Nia awoke with a gasp, soaked in sweat. The stars had shifted. Hours had passed. Her body trembled as she crawled back to her hut, the glow still dancing behind her eyelids. Her ankle burned, though there was no wound, just a strange warmth, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She lay on the floor, Jabari's robe around her shoulders, her breath shallow. The river may have died. But something else had awakened. Something ancient. Something watching. Something that had chosen her. The hidden womb. It began 3 days after the bite. Nia awoke to a dull ache in her belly, not the kind from hunger or illness, but something low, deep, and unfamiliar. She pressed a hand against her stomach. It was firm. Slightly swollen. She blinked in confusion. Maybe it's just from falling, she muttered, brushing her hair out of her eyes as she staggered to her feet. But the ache didn't fade. By sunset, it had grown tighter. The skin around her midsection stretched with a pressure that felt less like bloating and more like growth. By the end of the week, her belly looked 5 months pregnant. That's when the whispers began. At first, she thought it was the wind hissing through the reeds. But then, late one night, as she lay curled on her straw mat, she heard a sound like breath, but from within. Mother! Her eyes snapped open. She sat upright, heart hammering. Who's there? She whispered. Nothing answered, but something inside her shifted. Slowly. Deliberately. A cool ripple moved under her skin, like a snake gliding just beneath the surface. Nia had not lain with a man since Jabari's death. She knew this was no ordinary pregnancy. The next morning, she covered herself in a cloak and crept into the village, hood low, hoping to trade for herbs to ease the pain. But Aboko had already noticed. The whispers began the moment she stepped onto the red earth path. Look at her belly. She was cursed, I told you. She sleeps with ghosts. A small boy pointed and said too loudly, Mama, why is that woman so big in the middle? His mother snatched him away like Nia carried disease. Even the stall vendors turned their backs. She returned to her hut empty-handed and full of unease. As she reached her door, she saw a smear of ash across it, a village sign for danger, or worse, bewitchment. That night, the wind howled louder than usual. And again, she heard it, the voice inside. Mother, do not fear. The next day, Nia walked deeper into the forest. Past the whispering trees and mossy rocks, beyond the land most villagers dared to cross, stood a crooked hut of woven palm and stone. The air smelled of smoke and marala fruit. At its center sat Yoyomalu, the seer, the outcast, the feared. Old, wiry, and blind in one eye, Yoyomalu looked like she'd been carved out of bark and bone. But her other eye, cloudy silver, saw everything. You've come late, she said without turning. It's already begun. Nia approached slowly. Please. I need answers. Yoyo motioned for her to sit. She shuffled forward, lifted the edges of Nia's robe, and laid a wrinkled palm across her belly. She didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Then she whispered, the river remembers. Nia blinked. What does that mean? You carry its child, Malu said, sitting back. It shows you. Not for punishment, but purpose. Why me? Nia asked, voice trembling. Yoyomalu did not answer. Instead, she handed Nia a small vial filled with river dust. Drink this only if the pain becomes unbearable. But do not stop what's growing. It must be born. As the days passed, Nia's belly grew impossibly fast. By the second week, she looked ready to deliver. Yet she felt strong, alert, not weak or slow like most mothers nearing birth. She felt awake. Electrified. But more strange were the omens. One morning, she awoke to the sound of splashing. She rushed to the riverbed and gasped. For the first time in years, the water had returned. Not much. A trickle. But real water, moving, glistening in the light. Tiny silver fish darted through it, the same kind Jabari used to catch. She blinked, and then, just as quickly, the fish vanished. The water stilled. Within minutes, the river dried again, like it had never been there. Birds began flying in tight circles above the village, their cries sharp and dissonant. Dogs refused to go near the water. Goats gave birth to stillborn kids. The elders began meeting late into the night, fear etched on their faces. And always, the whispers continued. They broke the covenant. The land suffers for their greed. We remember. The villagers grew restless. They held secret meetings behind the baobab trees. Rumors thickened like smoke. Nia walks with spirits. She carries a demon. She speaks with snakes. A few villagers began sharpening machetes in the open. One even lit a torch during daylight and waved it near her path. Still, Nia said nothing. She stayed near her hut. Waited. Listened. Some nights, the voice inside her belly would soothe her to sleep with stories she didn't understand, tales of old waters, of forgotten gods, of a betrayal that turned rivers dry. By the end of the third week, even the elders were afraid. They had seen too much. They remembered Jabari's warnings. They remembered what they had done. They just didn't know that the river hadn't forgotten either. Birth of the serpent. The skies broke just after midnight. A dry wind whipped through the village of Aboko, rattling doors and snapping branches. Then, like a long-held breath finally exhaled, the storm came. Rain crashed against the earth, pounding the rooftops like war drums. Lightning tore open the sky, and thunder boomed so loud it shook cooking pots off shelves. People stayed huddled inside their huts, whispering prayers over their children, pretending they didn't hear the howl that rose from the direction of the riverbank. But they heard it. Everyone did. Inside her crumbling hut, Nia was on the floor, her body racked with pain. She lay on a mat soaked with sweat, rainwater leaking through the thatched roof, thunder echoing like a curse all around her. Her hands clutched her swollen belly, and her breath came in short, gasping sobs. It wasn't like labor. It was something else. The pain wasn't sharp, but heavy, like something ancient pressing against her from the inside, demanding to be born. Lightning flashed. The shadows in the room twisted. Then, a voice. It is time. She gasped, her eyes wide, and her whole body seized. There was no scream, the breath caught in her throat. Her back arched violently. Then the pressure shifted downward, flooding through her like a current, impossible to resist. With a final, wrenching surge, something slid from her. She collapsed backward, limp and trembling, her heart beat like thunder in her ears. She barely registered the wet sound of something alive moving across the dirt floor. But she saw it. Through the shadows and dim candlelight, it glided. A serpent. Not small. Not a child. At least 6 feet long, coiled and glistening, its scales a radiant gold, sleek with birth and rain. Its eyes, 2 embers burning bright red, stared at her with calm, deliberate intelligence. Nia blinked. Her voice was little more than a whisper. What are you? The serpent uncoiled slowly, lifting its head with almost regal composure. Then it spoke. Not with a hiss or a rattle, but with words that filled the room like a second storm. I am sorry, born not of flesh, but of memory. I have come to restore balance. Nia tried to sit up, but her arms were weak. Still, her mind, though fogged with exhaustion, sharpened at the sound of that voice. You can speak. So can the river, when one listens. It slithered closer, stopping just a few feet from her. It didn't threaten. It simply was, majestic, terrible, beautiful. This world forgot its promises. You were chosen because you did not. Nia's lip trembled. What do you mean? The storm outside cracked again, the walls of the hut shuddered. But inside, it was still, as if the air itself waited. Years ago, your leaders poisoned the sacred flow. They mined the earth beneath the river for rare stone, sacred to the old spirits. They made a pact with outsiders who sought power. And in doing so, they silenced the river's voice. Nia's eyes widened. The land withered. Life fled. Your husband warned them. He was silenced. A knot of grief twisted in her throat. Jabari, he knew, she said softly. Sari nodded. He remembered the covenant. Now, so do I. The room grew colder. The storm no longer seemed distant, it sounded like it lived inside the hut, raging silently just beneath the skin of the world. Nia's strength returned slowly. She sat upright, gripping the edge of the mat, trembling not with fear, but awe. What do you want from me? Sari's eyes dimmed slightly, not out of menace, but something else. Sadness. Understanding. Nothing more than your silence. For now, I must remain hidden. If the village sees me, they will act in fear. Fear leads to fire. Fire leads to death. But I gave birth to you. You were the river's vessel, Nia. A mother, yes. But also a bridge. Between what was, and what must come. Nia touched her belly. The weight was gone, but she felt something permanent beneath her skin. A change. A scar on the soul. Change is coming, Sari said, his voice now softer, more like wind through the reeds. They have broken the balance. The old ones stir. I was born to remind them, the river does not forget. The storm began to die down. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper, and the first fingers of dawn touched the treetops with pale gold. Sari slithered toward the corner of the room, where shadows collected like smoke. Before disappearing into them, he paused. When the time comes, you will know. Until then, protect me. And just like that, the golden serpent was gone. Nia sat in silence, staring at the space where he had vanished. The storm had passed. But the reckoning had only just begun. The reckoning begins. It started with lights. Small at first, flickers like fireflies floating low above the riverbed. Then brighter. Steady. Ethereal. Some swore they saw shapes in the light, scales, wings, eyes glowing gold. Others said they heard voices. Not loud, not human. Just whispers, drifting through the grass like mist. And wherever Nia walked, things began to grow. Dead trees near her hut bloomed overnight. The withered yams behind her home pushed green shoots from the dirt. Wild herbs returned to the edge of the river, where nothing had grown in years. The villagers noticed. But instead of awe, they felt fear. She brings the dead back, someone whispered. She walks with demons, another muttered. No one dared speak to her. They just watched her from behind doorways and tree trunks, eyes wide and minds buzzing with suspicion. At the heart of it all stood Chief Tando. A man with shoulders like a ram and eyes like cold iron. His word was law, and his power came not from wisdom, but from control. He didn't like things he couldn't explain. And he especially didn't like that the village's fear was no longer of him, but of her. This must end, he said to the council, slamming his staff against the floor. She is cursed. A danger. She brought this snake thing into the world, and now she toys with nature like a god. One of the elders hesitated. But the river shows signs of life again. And she. Silence. Tando growled. He leaned in, voice low and venomous. She is no healer. She is the reason Jabari died. She carries something evil. I've seen it in my dreams. Fire. Blood. Scales. And so, He did what scared men always do when they can't understand something. He gathered a mob. They came at dawn. A crowd of villagers, faces tight with fear, hands clutching machetes and makeshift torches. They moved down the narrow path toward Nia's hut, led by Tando himself. The air was heavy, the sky still bruised from the recent storms. As they neared the edge of the river, a young boy broke from the group and pointed. There. Look. Her hut. The crowd stopped. Glowing vines had grown across the walls of Nia's home. Bright green leaves, tipped in gold, shimmered even in the pale morning light. A goat had laid down at the doorway, sleeping peacefully, the first livestock to rest in the open in years. Tando snarled. It's a trick. He raised his torch. Burn it down. Now. Before the curse spreads. Inside, Nia stood barefoot, still, and waiting. Sari lay coiled in the shadows, hidden behind the doorway. His eyes glowed faintly, watching the flames flicker outside. They've come, she said quietly. They will try to destroy what they fear. But the truth must be seen. Sari slithered forward, slow and deliberate, like time itself had weight. Will they listen? She asked. No, he said. But they will learn. The door burst open. Tando stepped inside, torch raised, and froze. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the air shifted. The vines on the wall began to pulse. The floor vibrated. From the center of the room, Sari rose. Larger than before. Scales gleaming like polished brass. Wings unfurling from his back, spanning the room, casting dancing shadows against the walls. His voice came like thunder rolling through bone. You poisoned the sacred flow. You broke the covenant. And now, the river speaks. The villagers stumbled back in fear, some dropping their torches, others falling to their knees. But Tando didn't move. He couldn't. His feet were rooted to the floor, his eyes wide with horror as Sari's words rained down like judgment. You made a pact with outsiders. You traded life for greed. You silenced those who warned you. You killed Jabari. Tando opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came. Only a dry rasp, like dust trying to breathe. You told your people I was a curse. But the curse was you. Suddenly, the ground beneath Tando's feet began to crack. A sound like bones breaking underfoot echoed through the hut. He screamed, the first real scream in years, as the earth yawned open. The floor beneath him collapsed, a jagged black hole appearing from nowhere. He tried to run, but his legs failed him. He clawed at the air, reaching for anything, even near, but she did not move. She watched, her face unreadable. With one final cry, Tando fell, the earth swallowing him whole. And then, the hole closed. As if he'd never been there at all. Silence. Even the storm clouds held their breath. Then Sari spoke again, quieter now, but no less powerful. The river forgets nothing. It forgives only those who remember. He turned to the villagers gathered outside, their faces pale and tear-streaked. Choose what you will be next, servants of greed, or keepers of the land. No one answered. They didn't need to. One by one, they dropped their torches, turned away, and left. Some bowed. Some wept. But none looked back. Inside the hut, Nia sat down, her hands trembling. Sari curled beside her, resting his head gently against her leg. It is not over, he said. But the first wound has been closed. She nodded, eyes filled with something deeper than relief, purpose. The reckoning had begun, the river remembers. The rains came that night, soft and steady. No wind. No lightning. Just the quiet kind of rain that settles into the soil and whispers, it's time. By morning, the river flowed again. Not with a roar, but a sigh, as if it had been holding its breath for years. The villagers of Aboko woke to the sound of running water, birdsong, and the delicate hum of frogs returning to their sun-warmed stones. And where Nia walked, green followed. Vines crept up cracked walls. Flowers bloomed along footpaths. Fields once grey with dust now shimmered with dooky stalks of maize and okra. Fruit trees bent gently under the weight of revival. The village had changed. So had its people. Some came to Nia with offerings, roots, firewood, handmade cloth, their voices shaking as they begged her forgiveness. Others fled. Fled the village entirely, unable to live beneath the memory of what they'd allowed. They feared not Nia, but what she reminded them of, their silence, their complicity, their failure to honor the land. But Sori was no longer seen. He had vanished the morning after Chief Tando was swallowed by the earth, slithering into the depths of the reborn river, his golden scales reflecting the sunrise. Before he left, he had spoken to Nia one final time. The river is healed, for now. But balance is a living thing. Should it ever break again, call me. And I will return. In the weeks that followed, the village elders offered Nia a place of honor. They invited her to the council, to sit at the center of the stone circle where only the leader spoke. But she declined. I am not a leader, she said softly, only a listener. Instead, she chose to remain in her hut by the river, the same small, leaning home that had once sheltered her grief, her pain, her miracle. She rebuilt it with her own hands, planting herbs around its edges and painting the doorway with river clay and ash. When asked what she was now, she only replied, I am its guardian. Years passed. Seasons turned. Children were born who had never seen the river dry. They splashed and laughed and played in its clear waters, unaware of the silence it once held. But at night, they spoke in hushed tones of a golden serpent. They said he watched from the reeds with eyes like burning coals. They said he whispered to the frogs and the fish, and made the water sing when the moon was high. Most thought it was a tale for bedtime. Some knew better. Nia grew older. Her hair turned silver, her bones slower, but her eyes remained sharp. She rarely visited the market. The people came to her now, not for blessings, but for truth. She asked for nothing in return. She only ever listened. Then, one evening, as the stars blinked to life above the treetops, a knock came at her door. Nia opened it slowly, expecting perhaps a lost traveler or an elder in need. Instead, she saw a young girl, no more than 7, standing barefoot in the grass, eyes half closed, swaying gently. Behind her stood 2 women, wide-eyed and breathless. She found her way here on her own, one of them whispered. She's been sleepwalking. Talking to the river. Nia knelt in front of the girl. The child's lips moved. Her voice was barely a breath. He calls to me. The one with golden skin. He says, the water remembers. Nia's eyes glistened. She took the girl's hand gently and stepped aside. Come in, child, she said with a smile. The river speaks once more. The end.